thing that I want to discuss are themes. So what I did is I tried to just scan the body of knowledge that was in front of me last night and look for themes that I want you to address. And I'm gonna read some things, and I'd like for you just to say yes, I'd like to tackle that one. The themes that I want to discuss. George Floyd was a criminal who was on drugs during the time of his arrest. The riots are about anarchy and Antifa. All of the riots are pointed back to the upcoming election. And then I want to know what it feels like when you watch somebody that you care about share content that takes away from this conversation. I know that's a lot to pour onto you. Attah, can I ask you to start this conversation wherever you're most comfortable?
Sure. I think for me, I'll start actually with your first comment that George Floyd was a criminal that was found with drugs or whatever it was. Partly because that is a big pain point for me. Somehow we have allowed ourselves to get to a point where, and it's happened with everybody, where when a person of color, when a Black person is killed at the hand of the police, the first thing we want to do is criminalize that person, which tells me that we have devalued life to the point where it's okay that they died because they were a criminal. Same situation with the Ahmaud Arbery case, right? The first thing that happened, and even our president said, well, we don't know the full story. I don't know that we need a full story to understand that. Somebody was just killed in cold blood. A backstory is not needed. I sat down that morning after I heard those comments to say, what could this person have done to justify being pursued and killed? And I thought, if somebody, and I thought, I always like to think about putting myself in the shoes of the person. If somebody came into my house, broke into my house, and killed somebody in my family, God forbid they killed a member here, and then they took off, and I got in my car, grabbed a gun, pursued them, and I shot that person, guarantee you I'm going to jail. It doesn't matter who that person is. That person could be Black, brown, yellow, or green Martian. I'm going to jail. And so the fact that we would then say, hey, well, what did that person do? It's at the end of the day, it's wrong. And so for me, it's painful because it's gotten to the point where our Black lives, there's always well, he was a drug dealer, or well, he has a record of fighting, or well, he stole something when he was 3, or there was alcohol. It doesn't matter. A person's life was taken. And I think that's what we need to wrestle with and take away the politics. It doesn't matter whether you're red or blue or donkey or elephant. It doesn't matter. A human being's life was taken, and that was wrong, period. End of story.
Thank you for that, Attah.
Racism is tied to politics. And at some point, we're going to have that conversation. But I understand what you're saying, because we're in what I would call phase 1. And in phase 1, it's sad that we have to make others feel safe, and the others had nothing done to them to feel like they are in danger. But I feel like we are always in a place I have to make them feel safe with me to have a conversation. And so I understand what you're saying, but at some point, the politics does play a large role from the beginning of time. And so it's hard to kind of give some kind of assessment from my point of view without applying political antics to it, because it's there. Because when you have a leader, there are those who tend to say, stand with that leader at all costs. regardless to what they say or their viewpoints, and so we have laws, and they are always started with leadership. So I don't know how we can have a conversation without it. So I'm really not sure how to respond.
Because even when you think about race, it is politically and socially constructed. So when you think about racism, it's political because it's in every fabric and every DNA of Americans' institution, from our education system, healthcare system, transportation system, our government, is in our banking system. So you cannot talk about this topic without talking about it from a political lens. You just cannot, and that's another way. And I want to just um, piggyback off of Dr. Lacy. If we can't talk about politics, then we can't have the conversation. And then that's another way too of keeping us silent. We have to all realize this, and I say this for this institution and other institutions. Um, Anytime you're dealing with race and racism, it's going to be uncomfortable. And so, like I tell my students, you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
No, I was just saying, I just want to know what you mean when you say this conversation cannot be had without talking about politics.
Well, I say that because when the Constitution was written and it said all men are created equal, we weren't considered men and women at that time.
We were 3/5 of a person.
Yep. We were a commodity. And so as time went on, we continued to be treated that way, and laws were still in place to keep us as a commodity in a sense. We had to follow guidelines that were inhumane. When you think of when they say we're going to now allow you to be human, it's all ingrained into our systems. There was redlining, there was Jim Crow laws. I mean, there were banking practices. And so we have to always, even in the education system, we had to always branch away. And that's why we have HBCUs, because we could not go to a PWI, predominantly white institution. And it wasn't PWIs then. It was just theirs. And so we had to create our own. And even in creating our own, there were still laws that prevented our own institutions from succeeding. And you can get a degree, but then you have institutions who won't hire you because you got a degree from that place. And then when laws began to change again, there were limited jobs that we could have. And we had to kind of be above and beyond the normal Black person. We had to step out. And even when we started our own businesses, it was so hard because the rules and the laws were constructed, and each state had their own specific rules and laws. And it took forever for the federal government to say, it's okay for them to do this. And so I always look at the Green Book as a prime example of how each state, there were specific things we couldn't do just driving from one state to another. We couldn't stay at certain places. And there were cities, sundown cities, where they're telling you if you are caught here after dark, there's a price to pay for being Black. So when I say that, it's just a lot of different, and as laws change, there's always still a fine print in the law. And it wasn't long ago in like 2008 or 9, the state of Mississippi still has segregated proms. Segregated proms. And so, and the federal government allows certain states to still keep those laws. If you look at some of Michigan laws, you'll be amazed at some of the laws that are still there from 1950. And it's used when that incident occurs to justify a crime that someone of a lighter hue would have committed against a black person. Well, this is still in the law because no one ever looked at it and pulled it out. So that's kind of what we mean by political things cannot, political antics are always there. And governors, mayors, they use propaganda a lot to get voted. They make promises, and politicians lie. And so it's filtering through those lies, which most people don't have time to do. So you take that and trust that what they say is true. And a lot of it is we have political parties. So it's as if you have this code and a commitment to a party that controls how you make your voting decisions. And that's why I say it's political. And so until we address the antics in politics, because it's tied into injustice, it's hard to have a conversation.
And I think that that answer definitely covers what I was trying to get at. So I think, and if you don't mind me kind of like rephrasing it, I don't think that real progress can be made in this conversation without talking politics. And I wanted to qualify that just because, to your point, Matt, there are people that once they hear politics, they immediately tune out. For whatever reason, we've created this thing in our culture where if I'm conservative and I hear something that isn't, I instantly shut down. Okay, we've got this us versus them thing that happens where it's like if you don't associate yourself with my party, everything you tell me is untrue, and so that immediately puts walls up. And so I wanted to make sure that in our saying that, it doesn't force people to not have the conversation because, like, well, I don't want to talk politics, so I'm not even going to join into the conversation. Join in the conversation and understand, but also understand that in order for true progress to be made, there is a lot of political work that needs to be done for real equity and equality to be established or to be realized here. Thank you so much for that.
In this country, I think you also cannot have this conversation without talking about the criminalization of Black and Brown people in this country. And that's definitely political, the antics or the ideology of tough on crime or tougher on crime, and the communities that actually affects, which are communities of Black and Brown. So I think that's another piece when we think about politics of we have to have that conversation too around the criminal justice system, which I like to call, and I tell my students this, I call this the 21st century slavery movement. So
powerful and important. I just learned something really, really valuable to myself, right? Like you guys just really taught me. And I'm going to piggyback this question to Attah. Attah, you are a champion of the free market, right? I've watched you in your career over the last 10 years use business as a tool for growth. What do you say to your brothers and sisters who can't find the common ground between I love the free market and Black Lives Matter, but I also care about abortion? Where do we start with that demographic of people that is so against abortion that they've excluded themselves from the conversation about Black Lives Matter, or so upset with the government aid programs that they can no longer feel like they can be part of the Black Lives Matter movement? Attah, then I'm going to let each panel member speak on this.
That is a very deep question. Partly because one of the things we've learned to do again is just really, really draw distinct lines between groups and say, because they believe this, I don't support anything else that they support. So I think that's a part of it. So it kind of goes back in line with the political conversation that we just had. And you just wish that people wouldn't blanket things that way, because it immediately stops you from digging into understanding the realities of people and the situations that they've been forced to live in. So I think for me, like that, I mean, that's the short and simple answer is it's until we get away from this blanketing habit that we've built, people always draw those connections. It's like, for example, right now with the writing that we had this last week, when I say protesters, instantly people have an image, and I guarantee you 99% of those people, that image is a Black person. But when you look at the video, the protesters and a lot of the protesters that started the rioting, not just in this city, but in other cities, were not Black. And so you associate that. It adds to the association that you have with Black Lives Matter being an anarchist group. And then it adds to the association to people that are having abortions, all over the place. And we can't do that because it does not help with healing what needs to happen. So for us, it's really highlighting the truth about people and understanding that one human being can be all these different things. You could have somebody that is Black, that is pro Black Lives Matter, that is anti-abortion, that is pro don't give government handouts. You could have one person that is Black, that is pro-abortion, anti-Black Lives Matter, and anti-government aid. So it's like you can't blanket that. You have to really understand, okay, what is it in your existence, in your experience